So what was the cause of the devastating explosive failure that happened to the World Trade Center?
Secondary explosions and then subsequent collapses.
We heard reports of secondary explosions after the aircraft impacted.
The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself.
Anybody who's ever watched a building being demolished on purpose knows that if you're going to do this, you have to get at the under infrastructure of a building and bring it down.
Like, it sounded like gunfire, you know, bang, 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 and then all of a sudden, 3 big explosions.
At 10:30, I tried to leave the building, but as soon as I got outside, I heard a second explosion, and another rumble, and more smoke, and more dust. I ran inside the building, the chandelier shook, and again, black smoke filled the air. Within another 5 minutes, we were covered again with more silt and more dust. And then a fire marshal came in and said we had to leave because if there was a third explosion, this building might not last.
There was a heavy-duty explosion.
Secondary explosions and then subsequent collapses.
The full impact was seen in the moment in time. My colleague Stephen Evans, who was in the Trade Center and was interviewed just after the first explosion.
There was another big explosion in the other tower. Flames coming out of this billowing grey smoke. People still not panicking. People not quite understanding what was going on. Then somebody said that they saw an airliner going to one of those towers. Then, an hour later than that, we had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that. The thing that strikes me is, one, the terribleness of the incident. Whatever the cause, we don't go into politics, but whatever the cause, the terribleness, the hugeness of what's happened. So huge, in fact, that most of the people around simply can't understand what happened. People were just standing around, talking to each other, nodding their heads.
Although the September 11th attacks were almost 5 years ago, and the 9/11 Commission report has been released for some time now, some folks are still asking questions about what happened that day. A Zogby poll commissioned just last month by 911truth.org found that a whopping 42% of Americans think the government and the 9/11 Commission are covering something up. Michael Berger, 911truth.org press spokesperson. Welcome to Scarborough Country.
Thank you, Michael.
What's the one element that you think folks in Scarborough Country will say, holy smokes, I didn't know that?
Well, I had asked your producer if you would play a clip of Building 7, for example.
We will. Here you go. Tell us what we're about to see.
Well, I can't see the clip, but what you're seeing is Building 7 was north of the World Trade Center site. It was damaged in the collapse of the North Tower on its south face. It was a 47-story tall, 570-foot tall building, and yet even the FEMA report in the investigation of the collapse of that building, again, was never hit by a plane, collapsed at 5:20 in the afternoon on September 11th.
But it was in such close proximity to the Twin Towers. I mean, surely it paid a price because it was...
Absolutely, Michael, it did. However, again, the NIST investigation said that the damage from the collapse of the North Tower took out structural columns on the south face. If you watch that clip, you can see, depending on the clip you're showing, whether or not the east penthouse begins the collapse.
Michael Berger,
and yet, Michael, let me finish though. And yet, the building does not collapse to the south in the direction of the damage. It collapses straight down symmetrically in 6.6 seconds.
I got to move on because our time's limited.
Again, what you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself. Now we go to videotape the collapse of this building. It's amazing. Amazing, incredible picture word. For the third time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Let's just stay with this photograph for this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wired very carefully for days. And it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down.
There must be other examples if fires brought these buildings down. There were no examples. The probability that one of these buildings would come down due to fire, I mean, just looking at other buildings that have had fires and haven't collapsed, you know, of which there are hundreds of examples. So your probability is already 1 in perhaps 400 or 500. 3 buildings on the same day, I mean, just that one statistic, well, it's 400 times 400 times 400. You know, it's just a very small number already, the probability. And then for it to come down symmetrically, huh? I mean, again, the probability for that is more likely it will tip over, see? So that's the more so what's the probability that somehow all 3 buildings come straight down?
Galileo's law of falling bodies calculates the time in which an object will travel a certain distance in complete freefall. Distance, d, equals 16.8 times time in seconds squared. The South Tower was 1,362 feet tall. 1362 equals 16.08 times 84.7, or 9.2 seconds. The Twin Towers came down in nearly free fall speed. (9:59), New York City, New York. The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses to the ground in approximately 10 seconds. 29 minutes later, the North Tower follows suit, collapsing in approximately 10 seconds. Later that evening at 5:20, World Trade Center 7, a 47-story office building 300 feet away from the North Tower, suddenly collapses. The building's tenants included the CIA, Department of Defense, IRS, Secret Service, and Rudy Giuliani's emergency bunker. And the SEC was using it to store 3,000 to 4,000 files related to numerous Wall Street investigations. Although every single building surrounding Building 7 stood intact, it fell straight down into a convenient little pile in 6 seconds. Official explanation: falling debris from the Twin Towers created an internal fire, which ignited several fuel tanks inside the building. If this is true, then it would be the 3rd building in history to collapse because of a fire. The first 2 would be the Twin Towers. On July 28, 1945, a B-52 bomber lost in the fog crashed into the 79th floor of the Empire State Building. 14 people dead, $1 million in damage, but the building stands intact to this day. On February 14, 1975, a 3-alarm fire broke out between the 9th and 14th floors of the North Tower. According to the New York Times, the fire leads to intense scrutiny of the towers and eventually to a decision to install sprinklers. On May 4, 1988, a 62-story skyscraper in Los Angeles burned for 3 hours and spread over 4 floors. It did not collapse. On February 23, 1991, a 38-story skyscraper in Philadelphia, built in 1973, burned for more than 19 hours and spread over 8 floors. It did not collapse. On October 17, 2004, a 56-story skyscraper in Venezuela, built in 1976, burned for over 17 hours and spread over 26 floors, eventually reaching the roof. Guess what? It did not collapse. On February 12, 2005, the Windsor Building in Madrid, a 32-story tower framed in steel-reinforced concrete,